resilience. Fifth, the one map policy, a unified, accurate, and integrated mapping system is essential to ensuring legal clarity, reducing land disputes, and building a solid foundation for green investment and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, our vision for sustainability rests upon three interconnected pillars: ecological, economic, and the social. Together, they form the backbone of our policy and practice. Through early detection, swift coordination, and strong collaboration across multi-stakeholders, the nation stands united to guard its forests from fire. The success in forest fire mitigation is a history of resilience and cooperation. Forest fire mitigation has also shown remarkable progress from 2.6 million hectares burned in 2015 to only 213,000 hectares this year, 2025, transforming crisis into progress to early warning systems, rapid coordination, weather modification and operation, and multi-stakeholder cooperation. Next, optimization of national park management is mandatory, done through efforts such as implementing zero waste and zero accident, grading the climbing roads, and implementing a digital e-ticketing system. Indonesia's 57 national parks are undergoing transformation to enhance conservation and visitor experience. We are introducing modern facilities, digital ticketing system, and improved safety standard, ensuring that conservation and tourism, what so-called ecotourism, work hand in hand. This year, we launched a national grading system for mountain trails, promoting safety for climbers and ecosystem sustainability. Through restoration, we aim to create positive impact on forest ecosystems and the endangered endemic biodiversity within forest area and improve local communities' livelihood. We are advancing major restoration partnership such as $150 million project in Waikambas National Park. This initiative is expected to create 750 new jobs and generate up to $550 million in economic value, while safeguarding the endangered Sumatran elephant and its habitat. Pasangan Elephant Conservation Initiative, or PECI Aceh, PECI literally means head, established on 20,000 hectares of dedicated land donated by President Prabowo. We are building elephant corridors and community-based conservation areas. This effort realized through cooperation with international partners, and I would like to express my sincere gratitude to WWF Indonesia as well as British government for their invaluable collaboration in establishing PECI Aceh. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, through improved governance and reform in regulations, we will turn the carbon economic value of forests into new driver of green growth. Indonesia is transforming the carbon economic value of its forests into a new driver of green growth. I would like to emphasize that Indonesia is open the potential of the nature-based solution, not only for carbon reduction activities, but also for carbon removal, such as afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation. We are developing this opportunity in three specific areas, namely social forestry, conservation, and sustainable forest management. Furthermore, President Prabowo has announced a national target of planting 10 million hectares of degraded and critical land. This is a huge undertaking, and it reflects Indonesia's strong political will to restore our ecosystem and enhance our carbon sinks. However, we cannot achieve this alone. We need strong collaboration from the private sector, financial institutions, civil society, and local communities. Together, we can turn forest-based carbon sequestration into real economic value. Our strategy is clear: to build strong, inclusive, and globally connected carbon market ecosystem. Indonesia must ensure clarity of rules, align national MRV standards with global practices, adopt the state-of-the-art technology, attract institutional investors to finance nature-based solution mitigation projects, and aim for interoperability with global carbon markets. Through these key strategies, Indonesia will stand as a world-class hub for sustainable carbon market development. Forests are not just trees, they are our living reservoirs of food, energy, water, sustaining life and the nation's future. Through multi-usaha kehutanan (MUK), multi-purpose forestry business, permit holders will no longer depend solely on timber, but can also develop other potential such as honey, rattan, resin, medical plants, and environmental services, including carbon credits. These initiatives are projected to create over 240 jobs while expanding market access for rural producers. Indonesia energy policy now focuses on bioenergy, particularly sugar palm-based bioethanol, with potential of 24 million kiloliters. This strategic move will advance renewable energy adoption and reduce fuel import by at least 50%. Ladies and gentlemen, social forestry provides access for local communities to manage forest sustainability. Together with Financial Services Authority, OJK, we aim to make social forestry more bankable, enabling access to businesses, credit from financial sector. The social forestry program enables communities to manage forests responsibly under clear legal rights. So far, 8.3 million hectares have been distributed, involving 1.4 million households and creating 5.6 million of green jobs across the nation, a true model of inclusive sustainability. In partnership, again, with OJK, we are integrating social forestry into national green taxonomy, making community-based forest enterprises more bankable and unlocking access to financing. We will accelerate growth at the grassroots levels and create a new era of inclusive green investment. We believe that indigenous people and local communities are the guardian, even the best guardian of our forest. And therefore, the recognition needs to be accelerated. Equally important, it is our commitment to recognizing indigenous people and local community as the true guardian of our forests. In March 2025, we established a dedicated task force to accelerate the recognition of customary forests. Under my stewardship, the total area of designated customary forests covers approximately 70,000 hectares. Between 2025 to 2000, between 2025 and 2029, we aim to recognize an additional 1.4 million hectares, ensuring that recognition and justice advance in harmony. Distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, today this forum is not merely an event. It is a call to action. And Indonesia stands ready to lead, guided by unwavering spirit of collaboration, solidarity, and shared purpose. Let us join hands to invest in our shared mission to build green economy, conserve nature for the future generations, and empower community to thrive. The forest is not ours to own. It is ours to protect. The future of humanity depends on how we care for our forests today. May this forum mark the beginning of a new hope and era of global partnership for sustainable future, and I thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Kindly remain on the stage, Bapak Menteri. Mr. Raja Juli Antony, please remain on the stage as we'll continue with the next procession. We will now have another set of MOU signings, ladies and gentlemen. The next MOU, Support for Sustainable Forestry-Related Economic Policy and Investment Programs between the Ministry of Forestry of And next, ladies and gentlemen, is an MOU between Advanced Sustainable Paper and Packaging Solutions, between APP Group, Lubrizol, an MOU on Advanced Sustainable Paper and Packaging Solutions between APP Group and Lubrizol, signed by the Vice President Asia Pacific of Lubrizol, Mr. Henry Liu, and the Director of APP Group, Mr. Promised, we are going to continue giving the best perspectives on sustainability. And for this time around, would like to invite to the stage His Excellency Mr. Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, the Minister of Marine and Fisheries of the Republic of Indonesia, for the keynote speech.
Excellencies, distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. It is an honor to speak before such an inspiring audience at the Indonesia International Sustainability Forum 2025, a platform that brings together world leaders committed to transforming our shared sustainability vision into tangible action. Today's plenary theme, Feeding the Future, Sustainable Innovation to Boost Marine Food Productivity, resonates deeply with Indonesia's commitment to ensure that the ocean become the main driver of blue food security and climate resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, by 2050, our planet will host nearly 10 billion people. Yet land-based agriculture is already stretched to its limit. The ocean, however, holds vast potential as the next frontier for sustainable food production, offering abundant resources to help feed the future. With its vast and rich marine resources, Indonesia believes that the future of global food security lies in the sea in what we now call blue food. Ladies and gentlemen, through the blue economy policy, the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries has redefined the paradigm of marine resources management to achieve ocean health, wealth, and prosperity. This vision is operationalized through 5 flagship programs. Marine protected areas are being expanded to preserve ecological balance and safeguard marine resources. Quota-based fishing practices must be maintained with stronger regulation to prevent overexploitation. Aquaculture serves as an alternative approach to support food production while maintaining ecological integrity. We are focusing on 5 champion commodities: shrimp, tilapia, crab, seaweed, and lobster. Marine tourism and other extractive economic activities in coastal areas often cause degradation to coastline and small island. Therefore, they must be closely monitored and properly controlled. We involve fishermen and coastal community in plastic waste collection effort to help keep our ocean healthy. Through these pillars, Indonesia aims not only to feed its people, but also to support global food responsibly and sustainably. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the journey toward feeding the future is already underway through concrete programs of the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. Revitalization of 20,000 hectares of brackish water pond in North Java, modernizing abandoned pond into integrated tilapia farm. Integrated shrimp farming in Waingapu, East Nusa Tenggara, modernizing into sustainable shrimp farm production. Modernization of fishing vessel, transforming the small-scale fleet, can ensuring every fish catch contribute to traceable, sustainable food supply. National salt production revitalization to strengthen local salt production and to fulfill national salt self-sufficiency. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is also a potential market with a population of becoming 270 million people, the fourth largest in the world, of which 100 million live in coastal area. Indonesia welcomes partnership that strengthen the global food supply chain from sustainable investment, innovation, research, and knowledge transfer. We believe sustainability must not be an exclusive privilege of development nation. It should be a shared opportunity that connects technology with local wisdom. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Mr. Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, for the very inspiring keynote speech just now. And also would like to thank the Minister for attending this event, and you may continue with your next duty. Once again, thank you very much for the support to ISF 2025. It's time for me to introduce our moderator for this session, Unlocking Nature-Based Solutions, Sustainable Utilization of Land and Sea Resources theme. Let's invite her to the stage. Welcome Ms. Gita Shahrani, Director of Bumi Ecosystem Lestari Sejahtera.
Hi, everyone. Wow, there's no sound. Hi, everyone. Hi. It looks like a full room, so it's good that the energy is still high, and we're going to talk about something that might be of interest of everyone because it's about the emerging but the current future of Indonesia, both green growth but also blue economy. And we are happy, I'm very happy to actually moderate this panel because we will have a wide range of expertise and also a wide range of perspective coming from finance, carbon, and community on the ground as well as multi-stakeholders dialogue and policy integration. So without further ado, I will be calling the panelists one by one. And please give your biggest round of applause for the first speaker for today, Jan Yoshioka, the Vice President of Sustainable Finance, Asia Pacific Region for Conservation International. Welcome, Jan. All right, so everybody ready? Comfortable? Yes? Okay. I'd like to actually begin this panel by setting the context and to make sure that we are on the same page when talking about the current and the future growth of Indonesia that respects nature but also respect people and the community on the ground. So if I can ask you one thing each, what is the one thing that we need to get right to actually embark on this future, to actually integrate biodiversity and nature, and actually have nature-based solutions that is good for Indonesia? So maybe let's start from Jan. What is the one thing that we need to get right?
Yeah, thanks, Gita. I think for us, it's really about enabling policy and regulatory frameworks. And I think it's both in terms of two things, right? The integration of MBS into national mitigation and adaptation strategies, as well as setting up the market infrastructure for things like nature markets and emerging biodiversity and other kinds of credits.
Thank you. So policy and regulation. I think you need to be closer to the mic. I just got a cue. Thank you. Kalafi, what about you? What is the one thing that we need to get right?
I think aligning on nature and climate policies, because nature-based solutions receive only a fraction of the global climate finance available, despite it perhaps being one of the most cost-effective, no-regret strategies for abating greenhouse gas emissions, restoring biodiversity, and also building the resilience of communities.
Thank you. So not only the policy needs to be there, it needs to also be aligned with what actually works on the ground. Bjorn, any perspective from you? The one thing that we need to get right?
Yes, terima kasih, and I just also want to say thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here, and of course to His Excellency Minister Rajajouli for signing the MOU with AITA. We represent around 300 plus companies globally active in carbon markets who stand ready to invest in nature-based solutions, particularly in Indonesia. So if I would say one message, it would be unlock the opportunities of international carbon markets. And I commend the government of Indonesia's efforts of doing so. And I think during the panel, I hope we can dive into the enabling environment that needs to be developed for businesses and investors to really come alive in Indonesia for nature-based solutions.
Thank you. We will be digging deeper about that as well, especially with the opportunities, but the needs to balance also, right? Helge, what about you? What's the one thing from your perspective?
Thanks first and foremost for having me. Getting the economics right. What I mean by that is it's actually quite interesting. More than half of global GDP is dependent on nature and the ecosystem services it provides, whether it's fresh water, a stable climate, healthy soil, pollination, and things like that. Yet we haven't really accomplished associating a financial value for these ecosystems. We take them for granted, we like them for free, but actually we need to allocate a financial value to them.
Thank you. Getting the economic right begins with actually looking at it as something that is valuable. I completely agree. Amy, your thoughts?
Thanks, yeah, and thanks very much for the invitation to be at this important event. What we do is look at the international carbon markets and set a high integrity standard. And what we know about unlocking finance for nature-based solutions is that integrity, robust frameworks for carbon markets are essential to building that trust. And so if I have one thing, it's trust through integrity and robust frameworks that bring in the investment through the enabling policy environments that other panelists have spoken to.
Yeah, I love that. Move at the speed of trust, but that requires a structured framework, actually. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to actually begin with painting the picture. What is green growth and what is blue economy? And what does it look like in terms of actually putting things on the ground? So maybe I'll start there and maybe ask Helge to come in and describe, in your perspective, how do we actually integrate biodiversity into the green growth concept? And how do we actually make it not only good in writing, but also good on the ground?
Yeah, I think integration is indeed the key buzzword. So if I reflect on who we are a bank, and the core of what we do is we want to support our customers to thrive by providing advisory and financial solutions. So what we need to do is integrate nature into everything that we do, in the same way that we did this with climate. So we've just embarked on a project with Cambridge University. It took us 18 months, and we analyzed our entire lending book and asked ourselves, the things that we're financing, are they dependent on nature, and what is their impact on nature? With the purpose being to then take this knowledge and integrate it into all our decisions and processes, because it cannot be the icing on the cake, it's the cake itself. It needs to be really integrated into the core of what we do as a bank. And if you then think about it, here in Indonesia, beautiful country, very resource rich. Think about aluminium, copper, nickel, all those things that we need for the energy transition. Mining that and refining that is a process that could potentially be harmful to nature, could also be energy intense. So we need to look at this holistically, right? On the one hand side, we want all these minerals and metals because we need them, otherwise we can't drive around in electric vehicles or have all these other clean technologies. But we need to do it in a way that's not harmful to nature. So ultimately, it's really holistically and in an integrated way looking at things and being mindful. Sometimes there might be trade-offs and taking a decision wholesome.
Thank you. I think the highlight on looking at dependency, both on dependency and impact, both for and with nature, is the key here. And I'd like to actually go to Kalafi, because you work with a lot of multi-stakeholders processes, trying to integrate businesses with government, with policy as well. And Helga painted a picture that the finance might be there, but without this engagement with stakeholders in a holistic manner, it might not work. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fully agree with Helge. And to talk about how can we integrate business government engagement in the context of biodiversity, I think first let's do a quick recap of what was agreed at COP15 in December 2022, where the Global Biodiversity Framework was adopted by 196 governments. It is a roadmap for nature action, much like the Paris Agreement is for climate action, with an overall mission to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. And for the first time, the GBF strongly recognizes the role of businesses and financial institutions in achieving all the targets of the framework. And now the GBF will get implemented at the national level through your country-specific national biodiversity strategies and action plans, or NBSAPs in short, or IPSAP in case of Indonesia. And you also have some of the business targets in these NBSAPs like Indonesia also has. So here, I think it's very important to strengthen business-government dialogues. And one fantastic example that we have from our recent work is in Malaysia, where very recently the government launched their strategic roadmap and action plan for business and biodiversity. This is a work supported by Business for Nature. This roadmap provides a pathway to businesses on how they can integrate biodiversity into their core operations. And this was also an opportunity for businesses to be part of the policy-making process in a more structured way, and for the government also to hear directly from businesses what's working, what are the challenges, and that these policies are very much rooted in business realities. And I'm very happy to share here that we are also currently working in Indonesia with our partner, Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development, to develop a business and biodiversity action plan to support the implementation of the business targets of the IPSAP, very much with the support of the Ministry of Environment and Bapenas. While these policies are there, I think it's also important what Helge mentioned, that businesses also need to take ownership and leadership of integrating nature into their strategies and not think about nature as a nice to have or as a CSR activity, but the strategic priority for their businesses. And just very quickly, what can businesses do to demonstrate this? I think 4 key actions. First, assessing and measuring their nature-related risk impacts and dependencies across their value chain. Second, committing to setting transparent science-based targets based on this assessment. Third, transforming our business operations and models and advocating for policy ambition. And finally, disclosing on immaterial nature-related information. And I think this provides a fantastic foundation to corporates to develop a credible nature strategy. Just very quickly, in this context, I want to also mention a campaign which we had launched in November 2023 called It's Now for Nature, which encourages companies to develop and publish ambitious nature strategies to demonstrate their commitment on nature action. Thanks.
Thank you for mentioning the It's Now for Nature as well, because that opens a lot of segue for different conversation in Indonesia, not only for businesses in a larger scale, but hopefully also businesses that are still growing. It might be small and medium, but they do have this opportunity to grow into larger player across the country. And I'd like to actually go into more in-depth conversation on the blue economy side. We've heard about the green growth and how biodiversity and nature should be put at the center from Helge and Kalafi. But I'd like to go to Jan and basically ask your opinion about the blue economy side and how at the end there are different trends. I know that you've signed your MOU as well today on one particular sector. I'm wondering what is it that Indonesia need to look out for in terms of trend, and how as a country we should position ourselves so that we can take the best opportunity that we can get.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Gita. I think it's really exciting for us to be having this conversation in Indonesia. As many in the room know, Indonesia, with respect to its blue economy, is the largest within the ASEAN region. And I think with a lot of the policy drivers in terms of the blue economy plan and strategy, and some of the work that's been done more recently through this administration to promote things like downstreaming, which we heard in the keynote speech, these are all sort of very strong enabling conditions and signals to the private sector about what this could look like. two of the opportunities that we see for Indonesia specifically with respect to nature-based solutions are one, in terms of blue carbon, right? Indonesia is home to 20% of the world's mangroves, 17% of its overall blue carbon, potential globally. And we think that there's opportunities to make this happen. I think the minister who spoke right before this was talking about looking at the use of abandoned and perhaps even active aquaculture ponds. In terms of mangrove restoration, we have been seeing sort of an interest amongst the private sector to be able to utilize sort of these assets, right, these abandoned assets for mangrove restoration, but not solely at the expense of business productivity. CI, Conservation International, together with our partners Conservasi Indonesia, have been pioneering with the private sector, including startups here in Indonesia like Jala, to be able to develop and implement models such as climate smart shrimp, which really are trying to couple sustainable intensification of shrimp farming through technology alongside mangrove restoration. So it's really thinking about how do we address sort of the barriers to productivity within shrimp farms to make available lands, even in areas sort of set aside for concessions for aquaculture, to be able to sort of have both a nature positive and a livelihood positive type model. I think the second thing for us, CI through our CI Ventures Impact Investment Fund has had a strong focus on Indonesia over the past year in terms of looking at companies that are creating nature positive outcomes in the blue economy. Seaweed and sort of particularly on downstreaming and really thinking about how to move Indonesia from sort of a major exporter of primarily raw, dried, and semi-refined materials into really high value-added products, right? And having that sort of technology, that innovation, and that processing capacity be within Indonesia is certainly, an area of focus for us, as evidenced by our new MOU signing with Standard Chartered, Apindo, and Conservasi Indonesia.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it's music to my ear, because Indonesia as a country, our long-term development plan, aside from the IPSAP roadmap that we also issued, have had this term called bioeconomy. And the center of bioeconomy is basically integrating the green, the blue, and the circular, but focusing on what you just mentioned, which is value-added product that is enabling us to look at biodiversity and nature differently, but also giving opportunities for innovators and entrepreneurs from Indonesia to actually thrive in this ecosystem. Now, we've talked about the green, the blue, and now we need to go back to Amy's point, actually. Moving in the speed of trust and creating a structure that enables this trust to actually grow also. And probably you are the best person in the panel to actually talk through us, talk through what you've done and your organization in actually building this governance structure that enables trust to actually allow everybody to talk about things probably from different perspective, but still agree on a common goal.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think it's a good question, because one of the things we understand about carbon markets is that you can unlock finance if you can build highly inclusive, trustworthy, and transparent regimes into the rule base, so that everybody is understanding what's going on. And that operates at many different levels. It operates at the project level, and that means important processes like FPIC, free prior informed consent, that's ongoing, local stakeholder consultation, things like ensuring what we call social permanence. So, for example, if we take the mangrove example, I was with local communities earlier in the year in North Sumatra in mangrove restoration projects, where because the project is designed inclusively around actually what that community want, the structure builds into the goals that they have, and that builds trust. It means that they will continue doing the project because they're deeply engaged in it, because it's what they want to see. So that's a really important project-specific level. And then, with carbon goes through projects, and they are then, the emission reductions or removals that are achieved from those projects are then validated and verified. And that third-party independent review of the way a project works, transparent review of data, of measurement, of processes, that builds trust. And then the work we do is at the layer above, where we review that process that has been implemented. And by being really an independent, global, independent governance body for the carbon markets with a rule base, which we call the core carbon principles, against which we assess robust carbon systems, we're able to look at that and say, can you replicate the data? Can you see that stakeholder consultation has happened properly? Have you required that program to make all the documentation publicly available so it can be subject to community scrutiny? And these processes where you build from person to process right to the top, this builds the trust, and this is governance, right? So we have a rule that says every single thing that that enables a project to calculate its removals or reductions must be public. And we check that. We go through a process of looking at project data of projects operating and checking that you can replicate that data. So the process we provide helps to ensure that that governance system oversight is working well. And that's really important in carbon because fundamentally, if you're trying to value nature-based assets through carbon revenue streams, because carbon is an intangible asset, the transparency and the governance systems are really key to building that confidence. And it matters not just for the sake of measuring the global contribution of nature-based solutions to the climate journey, but it really matters because that's where the investability comes in. And protecting nature costs money, and you have to bring the money in somewhere. And we know that public finance is less available than it ever has been. So private finance is carbon finance, and so just going through that high integrity system of the core carbon principles helps attract that finance, and we're seeing that that's the trend that is being developed. So governance at every level, I think, is one of the things that we find really important.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting. And I think what you just described paint the picture that the future is something that the community themselves can actually have a deep sense of ownership. And carbon is a pathway to that, but that is not necessarily the end goal. Thank you for highlighting that. And over to Bjorn, and looking at it from Amy's last point in terms of investability and allowing more private finance to flow. In terms of what do you envision for Indonesia as well and the opportunity that Indonesia can actually tap into, is there anything in particular that you think should be a core fundamental?
Sure, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to agree with Amy, and as Aita, we've been supporting, of course, the work of the ICVCM and the core carbon principles to build trust in this market. I also see around me in the room many fellow colleagues working in this space. So I'm not going to explain how to develop a project in detail because I believe we have the experts in the room with us. But I think what is important to note is that we are now entering a new era of carbon markets. We are no longer in the past era where carbon markets are unregulated and not governed by the national governments in the countries where the projects and carbon credits are being generated. What this means is both a challenge and an opportunity. I just came back from Ethiopia, from China, from Malaysia. Every government in the world right now struggles in understanding how to regulate, how to govern carbon markets and carbon projects to make sure that the financing that is flowing to these projects is real, it's viable, and it follows the integrity principles outlined by the ICVCM and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So for Indonesia government in particular, there is a need to update and understand the regulations that have been provided under the UNFCCC level, so at the international level, pull them down to the national level and think about how do we establish the necessary processes for authorizing and approving projects, for recording and tracking transactions, for sharing benefits with local communities and indigenous peoples. And then, of course, at the final level is the local communities and the developers that are working directly with them. So throughout this system, we have to work together as businesses, as governments, as civil society to enable this finance to flow. And I think, just as a final point, we have seen some bad carbon projects in the past. If you look at the real estate market, you will also see that sometimes a house is not what it's supposed to be, right? A real estate broker is not selling the house that they promised you to deliver. That does not mean the market is completely broken. It means we need to address the systemic risks in that market. And unfortunately, we will continue seeing some bad apples. And as a governance system, we have to address those bad actors and support the trust for those who are really doing the right and the good thing.
Great analogy. I'm going to steal that. Doesn't mean that the whole sector is broken, but we need to actually have an integrity of maintaining a system that works. And that brings me back to the point that Jan was mentioning, actually. So what you said about transforming this into an opportunity that Indonesia can also provide all actors with benefits. And you mentioned that you work a lot with entrepreneurs in Indonesia. And I'm curious to your perspective about what Amy and Bjorn have just alluded in terms of carbon, looking at it as a tool and a pathway for growth, but at the same time, do you think it will provide the right type of opportunities for the actors that is within the value chain that you just described? Will it actually help entrepreneurs that are innovating with products on the ground, for example?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, I do think that there is a very strong intersect. So I think the short answer is yes. I mean, we see a lot of entrepreneurs at multiple scales, right? Early stage seed companies into growth companies who are working in coastal ecosystems for whom I think there's a lot of discussion, a lot of interest in how carbon finance might be able to integrate, particularly where they're offering solutions that help to protect, restore, maintain blue carbon ecosystems, whether mangroves or seagrass. I think we've seen a large spike. In fact, a lot of the private funds that have been raised that are focused on nature-based solutions type carbon investments do include about a 10 or 20, 15% window that's really focused on technology and innovation, right? I think when you look at where there's been a lot of sort of growth and innovation around sort of carbon measurement, helping to make MRV a bit more cost-effective, a lot of those tools had historically been tested in North America, right? The temperate forests of North America, and had not really been adapted and tested in the context of our tropical forests, particularly in Indonesia, right? Hugely diverse canopies, a much different system. And when we talk about the coast, right, like thinking about sort of what the unique differences are between mangrove ecosystems in different countries. So I think there's a real opportunity there. Indirectly for entrepreneurs, for innovators, for the capacity that Indonesia is building and already has amongst engineering and sort of really, really bright entrepreneurs here in the country to play a role. But I also think that it's sort of, we've talked a bit about mitigation and nature-based solutions, but we can't forget that a lot of the solution sets that people are developing, including here in Indonesia, are really talking about adaptation, right? Thinking about how we adapt some of our most significant blue economy sectors, such as fisheries, such as marine and coastal aquaculture, to sort of address the challenges, right? The increased disease risk because of what's happening in the environment, or the impacts of these sectors on the environment itself. So I think that there's huge opportunity, and it's been very exciting to sort of see both from a government perspective, both from a university perspective here in Indonesia, and of course from the private sector and the accelerators and all of the ecosystem players who've been really trying to bring the best minds to the fore to address those solutions.
Yeah, thank you for also bringing up the adaptation point. We just had a discussion yesterday on adaptation and resilience, which is another finance discussion that seemingly are still a bit disconnected with what we're talking about right now, but actually are connected, and it should be integrated from the both risk mitigation perspective, but also how are we living in the future. And that brings me back to Kalafi, and you mentioned a lot about the way that businesses can also play a role in terms of looking at their target right, but also setting up how the target can be delivered with other partners and other stakeholders. And I wonder if you can pinpoint specific stakeholders that these companies have been very open to work with and have had great partnership, and why did that happen in a way? Is it community on the ground, or is it local government, or any type of stakeholders that are the right fit for this type of much more pioneering solutions, I would say?
Thank you for the question, Geeta. And first, of course, government is the first stakeholder, I think. And here I want to just mention that the action plans that I mentioned about Malaysia and beyond Malaysia, we have also worked in Chile, Colombia, South Africa. We have ensured that these action plans also refer to different stakeholders. And one of the stakeholders is, of course, indigenous people and local communities. And also the local community, it could be your farming community. For example, one of the companies which is based in Singapore, they have actually a target to become forest positive across all their supply chains, including implementing deforestation plans for high-risk suppliers. And so to achieve that target, they have actually planted around 2.3 million trees through agroforestry, which not only supports or improves biodiversity, but also provides farmers with a sustainable source of income. So this has been one of the examples. Then there are other companies in concrete and cement sector that have also worked with local communities in designing nature-based solutions. So I think what makes the difference is engaging with the local communities and indigenous people, not as stakeholders, but as partners. So it's important to empower them for legitimacy and impact. And businesses can do that by engaging with indigenous people enterprises through mechanisms such as the Indigenous Peoples Chambers of Commerce, promoting the local knowledge and ensuring that the stakeholders are, the local communities are seen not as stakeholders, but leaders and active participants of these projects. And I think also important for businesses is to disclose on any relevant business activities where they have implemented free, prior, and informed consent process. So following this process is also important. And I think here, again, all of these are interlinked. Again, the role of government, once again, comes in. So where it's important with the nature-based solutions governance process, you include the indigenous people and local community voices for design and governance. And also, for example, designing policies which avoids, minimizes, and compensates for any unintended negative impacts on local communities, building capacity and training of local community workers, and also expanding the available finance to indigenous people and local communities. For example, we have now COP30 next month, and I hope that parties will expand their overall finance to IPLCs, including at least 30% of nature-based solutions finance going to projects led by IPLCs.
Yeah, it's an exciting opportunities for us to also connect a big movement that is talking about land rights and tenurial rights, and how does that fit into the picture as well. So thank you for pointing that out. And you mentioned a lot about cross-sectoral partnership with the role of the government within to actually become the policymakers and the regulatory framework provider. And this reminds me of a recent conversation that I've had with a colleague from DBS, actually. How do we look at it as an opportunity to also shape how Indonesia and how Asia can provide this type of ecosystem that allows finance to flow, but also flow to the right hand? So I'm going to go to Helge for this.
Yeah, sure. I think one word that we have mentioned a lot is really critical, which is collaboration. In simple terms, these challenges are all quite significant. So we are all accountable, we are all responsible, but no one can do it alone. So the simple concept is what we do here. Get everyone into a room. So you have policymakers, regulators, the private sector, finance, think tanks, services providers, standard setters, everyone into a room and jointly really work on these issues. Finance is very often not necessarily the bottleneck, which might not sound intuitive. But very often we need to really get everyone into the room. When I was in London, I was quite intrigued. We talked a lot about the biodiversity net gain policy. It's a new policy implemented in 2024, where, for example, if you build a larger real estate asset, you actually have to increase biodiversity either at that asset site or somewhere else by 10%. It's very new. Let's see whether it works. A bit early to judge. But the point is the ecosystem comes together and there are enabling pieces like policies and regulations that ultimately allow private sector action and then finance to flow. So that's critical, collaboration. I repeat that I don't actually think that we have a lack of capital. What we do have is a very significant risk-return challenge. So how do we indeed challenge the capital into the right solutions? And we actually, also good news, already have many of the tools we need. So we talked a lot about carbon markets, right? Everybody talked about carbon markets here. I remember DBS is a founding shareholder of CIX, which is a global carbon market and exchange. And already a few years ago, we conducted an auction for Delta Blue, which is one of the largest mangrove projects in Pakistan. And the price was a significant premium over other carbon credits, precisely because it had social co-benefits, it actually protected the natural habitat, and so on and so forth. So there is a product. How do we now scale this? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And the good work on establishing trust and so on makes me hopeful that we can do this. We also work as an ecosystem right now on what we call transition credits. It's a new form, has actually never existed, of carbon credits, which arise out of the early shutdown of coal and the replacement of coal with renewable energy. And we ultimately want to blend transition credits into the capital stack. So the logic is always the same, that you need different forms of capital that have different return requirements. Here, another buzzword that you will hear a lot is blended finance. As a banker, we've known this product for decades. Nothing new. Here in Indonesia, we recently financed a major water project which actually supports clean drinking water for about 2 million residents in Jakarta and the surrounding townships. And that was a blended finance structure. So there was commercial capital in there, provided MDBs, DFIs, and so on. But how do we do this at scale? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. In Singapore, we just established a government-sponsored platform which we call FAST-P, Financing Asia's Transition Partnership. And there was a first fund launch. And the idea is to create a platform which, despite the fact that the assets we are financing, they're all unique, all very different, we create investment opportunities which are a little bit standardized to really be able to scale this. So that is the critical challenge. How do we overcome risk-return challenges? The products are there, carbon markets, blended finance, but as an ecosystem, can we create the enabling environment to really scale this at speed?
Yeah, I love how it touched into a point that when we're building an ecosystem, it's not only de-risking one company at a time, it's actually de-risking the entire ecosystem. It requires much more what Kalafi and Jan both was mentioning, but also Amy, looking at these different pieces and how can all actors that allows the ecosystem to grow get the financing that they need in the form that they need as well. So I'm going to go to Amy actually. In the work that you've done in terms of looking at it from a governance and a structure perspective, have you seen a model that allows us to actually identify things that way, looking at it as an ecosystem? So for example, if you see a project, then how can all actors in the FPIC process also recognize the benefit from their perspective, regardless whether they're policymakers, young entrepreneurs, local fishermen, but this is something that is being discussed when conducting the planning.
Yeah, thanks. So let me just talk about our self-led, hosted Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Engagement Forum, which we channel finance and support to from our own funding, and it's a self-led forum of individual representatives of different Indigenous peoples groups who work together on what they think are the priority areas for Indigenous and local community engagement in carbon markets. And they've recently come out with their priority areas. And those are the areas that they will be working on in the next 2 years around bringing the Indigenous view to the carbon markets to the place where it belongs. We have 10 core carbon principles. We don't see things like sustainable development or FPIC as co-benefits. They are a core principle. And that's really essential to us building trust in this market so it can scale investment. So our Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Engagement Forum comprises ecopreneurs, people who are running projects, designing projects. And maybe I'll talk about two of the things that they're doing that are perhaps really central to the way that we need to reorient the carbon markets to build it into a model that really values nature and the stewards of nature in a way that works in the longer term. So, for example, historically, the carbon markets don't understand the concepts of traditional ecological knowledge, right? It's a very sort of specific approach to measurement that hasn't traditionally known how to harness traditional ecological knowledge. And that's a real barrier to intergenerational knowledges being used in carbon markets by ecopreneurs amongst indigenous peoples and local communities. So they're working on that. And they're doing a whole load of work around bringing understanding of traditional ecological knowledge into the carbon markets, which, you know, that goes hand in hand with understandings about how nature is protected, conserved, and rehabilitated. The other thing they are doing is taking a self-strengthening approach to the work they do and helping other communities and other indigenous peoples who want to set up carbon projects that they operate, that they run, to have the skills they need to be able to do that and engage with the carbon market, other actors in a way that is led from that process. So, you know, when we talk about an inclusive carbon market, it's really from that understanding that there are fundamentals that historically may not have been in the market, that need to be in the market for it to scale credibly, right? I mean, nature-based carbon assets are very long-term. They're very long-term, 60 years and onwards. To build projects that actually can maintain the stock and last and be resilient and change community lives, you have to go right back to the people who do the work. You can't just say, okay, we're going to put a fence around this. It fundamentally doesn't hold for the length of time that it needs to. So I think really just taking that centrality of inclusive engagement and driving carbon projects from where they belong and where they should start brings that trust. And I think this is, you know, 2/3 of the indigenous peoples in the world are in Asia, right? This is the place where that journey will be the strongest. And we're really pleased to be supporting it and working alongside others to really build out a long-term vision for sustainable finance in this region.
Yeah, lots of food for thoughts there. In the coalition that we're building in Indonesia for this value chain of looking at how product and services can respect biodiversity, a lot of the discussion is also around local and traditional knowledge. One point that was discussed was how can we look at technology and innovation even differently and looking at local and traditional knowledge as part of not the past, but the current and the future, and redefining what do we mean all by innovation and technology, and how does that actually benefit the community and indigenous people on the ground. And thank you for pointing out that the key is actually to build up a long-term vision that talks about scalability as well. So I'm going to go to Bjorn before we open up for question in terms of scalability and where you see this can all go into. What are the future opportunities out there when we design systems that represent at least 5 different things, right? The panel have talked about how it has to be multi-stakeholders. It has to be built on trust and structure. It has to prioritize the people themselves. It has to have an integrity, but the economics needs to be right as well.
Thanks. So I would agree with what Helge mentioned. I think that financing is there, and the same is true in carbon markets. The carbon finance is there, but there is a mismatch between the supply and the demand. So what types of projects, most likely in the financing world, are we looking for? And also the same in the carbon market. What types of credits are buyers looking for? And how do we make those available whilst moving on again to this new era of carbon markets? So I think for Indonesia, I would highlight just 3 things. Number 1 is unlocking the domestic demand by introduction and strengthening of compliance carbon pricing instruments in Indonesia. So Indonesia has already an emissions trading scheme for the coal power sector, and we hope that this can be expanded and strengthened to cover also other industrial sectors that can then allow for offsets or carbon credits in forestry and nature-based solutions to scale this demand and market domestically. Secondly, is the role of independent verified carbon credits or so-called voluntary carbon markets, where corporate buyers, usually in Europe or North America, but increasingly also in Asia and this region, looks to procure carbon credits to meet their corporate voluntary and net zero targets. For that, we also need enabling environment from the government. Yeah. And I'm pleased to see a representative from Ministry of Environment here. Recently, there has been several mutual recognition agreements signed with Vera, with Gold Standard, and with GCC, who provide this integrity that Amy was talking about to the market. But we also need to look at making those credits CCP approved by the ICVCM, which is what buyers are currently looking for. And finally, as the third segment, is the role of international carbon markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And again, for that, we see a lot of demand growing from countries like Sweden, where I'm from, or Singapore, where I'm based, as well as Japan and Switzerland, who are now looking for carbon credits that are authorized and can be used towards their own climate targets or NDCs. We also see a growing demand from airlines internationally under the Corsia scheme, which are looking for up to 150 million tons of authorized Article 6 credits in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
But we need that enabling environment and policy stability to allow for those transactions to take place.
Yes.
And I think that's where, together as a panel and also AITA, we look forward to supporting the government of Indonesia and the business actors in this room.
Yeah, opportunities are out there. It's just up to all of us to actually debottleneck a lot of the bottlenecks right now. So Q&A are open. So if you want to submit your questions, we've had this on the screen. You can scan the barcode or the QR code and submit your questions. Or I think an alternative is just to open it up. We have around 7 minutes for Q&A. Yes. Okay, let me see. If we can get the questions that are submitted, I'm going to just quickly check my phone whether they queue me some questions that have been submitted before I open it up to the floor. All right. No? No? All right. Let's open it up to the floor then. Yes? Any of you wants to ask to the panelists? Please raise your hand and maybe a microphone is going to come and get you there. Yeah, raise of hand. No? I think it's a bit of an intimidating room also, right?
Everyone is very scared.
It's a large room, so you don't want to kind of chime in.
Also, I think we didn't get enough coffee after the lunch. So
yeah, it was a good lunch. But just checking to the committee as well. Are we going to get the questions up on the screen? Yes? Yes? No? No answer? All right. If there's nobody that wants to ask from the audience directly, I have some more questions actually. Let's just wait until maybe 5-10 more seconds just to ensure that I get a right cue. Yes? Okay. All right, so just in case you want to ask questions, we still have time and you can raise your hand if you want. Yes, okay. So, we heard a lot about scalability and keeping things on the ground. But those are two, I think, polar opposites sometimes. It's like holding tension, right? You want to be intentional about everything, but you also want to make sure that it's scalable. So I think I'd like to allow all of the panelists to maybe wrap it up in terms of how do we hold this tension? How do we look at this as something that is scalable and makes us all excited about this is the future growth and the future economy, while at the same time really be hard on, not, well, consistent on maintaining who gets the benefit is the right ones. So maybe something on that as your closeout as well. Maybe starting with Amy.
Thanks, and it's a great way to close because it's exactly things like the work that Indonesian ministries are doing to create enabling environments, as well as really holistic, comprehensive standards like the core carbon principles that resolve what you call that tension between scale and really well-designed projects that take a moment at the stakeholder level. Because what we know is that if you can get enabling regulation and consistent, stable signals and well-designed projects, that finance, as Bjorn said, is ready to flow. Yeah? And so for me, it's really an exciting moment because we have that ability now to see the region thrive in really high-integrity carbon projects.
Thank you. I think the word to highlight there is high integrity. How do you maintain integrity? Because it's not only good for the projects, it's actually good for the community and nature. And, well, it's good for the finance part as well. The price will be good. Helge, over to you. How do we hold this tension? Well, be optimistic that we can actually do it.
I'm definitely optimistic, and it's simply going to build on Amy, because Amy set the stage on what we need to do, and for finance, there's actually not necessarily a tension. So the things that we want to finance, whether it's the blue economy, the green economy, and so on, all unique projects where we need to do a lot of groundwork, which was very, very articulately covered here by my panelists. The investment opportunities, so we translate this into investment opportunities. We can standardize those such that not each and every time an investor goes to Indonesia and wants to invest, he needs to completely relook at this again. So it's not necessarily a tension. We just need to be smart how we translate all these unique products that we want to finance, projects, into rather standardized financing instruments. That's the whole magic, which we're also trying to accomplish with this Fast P in Singapore that I mentioned.
Thank you. And I agree in terms of looking at it, not necessarily as tension, but actually as an opportunity to actually channel it right. So, because you've cued Yan and her extensive experience and also the explanation, what do you think? Can we hold this tension? Is there a tension or not really?
I don't think that there's a tension between the two themes, but there's certainly some work that needs to be done to bridge that gap, right? And so, with all of our work focused on, working with startups, obviously a lot of the financial sector, particularly in the venture capital stage, really wants to promote that scaling growth. But I think I would also come back to Amy, because I think we've seen, some issues with certain companies, particularly in sectors like aquaculture, where, at the expense of, or at the with this overemphasis maybe on what scalability looks like, we've forgotten what it means to build with integrity and to really focus on sort of the kind of impact, both financial and environmental and social, that we can actually validate, right? And so I think more transparency, better frameworks, and yes, the standardization that incorporates that kind of trust and integrity, I think are really those key ingredients to scale, whether we're talking about carbon or other aspects of the real economy.
Thank you. In terms of looking at scalability and working at scale as two different things as well. Thank you for highlighting that. Kalafi, over to you.
I think I'll just build on what Jan said. So, and also linking to my opening remarks about aligning policies. So clear, consistent, integrated policy frameworks, which will make it easier for businesses to develop transition plans, strategies, and invest more confidently and effectively in long-term climate, nature, and land use goals.
Thank you. Integrated but well-aligned policy. And Bjorn.
Yeah, I think we have to move from carbon credits being like art pieces, where someone chooses, I like a Monet or a Van Gogh with different types of co-benefits and certain types of projects, towards actually becoming more of a standardized and commodity market for it to scale up and provide the financing that we know it can deliver. And I think Article 6 helps with that. ICVCM and the core carbon principles help with that, and I hope and I believe that the government of Indonesia is going to help with that as well. So we look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a rich panel. Maybe a big round of applause for all of the panelists. I just got like 2 questions in my phone that was submitted, so maybe you can answer it in writing later. But thank you so much for joining us in this panel. I usually close out a panel with doing like a little limerick or a little poem based on the word of choice, something that was calling me when hearing you guys is the word now. So it's not about the future, we're talking about what's happening right now, and it's already doable. So the N stands for nature should not be considered as bonus or co-benefit, but at the core of all of the solutions that we're trying to make, whether the color is blue or the color is green. The O stands for opportunities of integrating multi-stakeholders into the conversations from the get-go will allow you actually to build trust but maintain structure within. And the W stands for weaving the connectivity between working at scale with maintaining integrity benefits us all and should be the priority. So thank you so much for all panelists. My name is Gita Shahrani from the Earth-Centered Economy Coalition and Bless Indonesia. Over to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gita Shahrani, for leading this and the challenges as well as opportunities and enablers in scaling up renewable energy generation and improve transmission infrastructure. And that's going to happen today as well. So we do hope that you follow all of our programs until the end of today. And ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, we would like to present to you a video about Indonesia International Sustainability Forum 2025.
The world is evolving, bringing new challenges alongside new opportunities. With a growing population, the demand for food, water, energy and meaningful employment continues to rise. As pressures on our planet increase, so does the shared responsibility to respond with urgency and cooperation. For many years, fossil fuels have been the foundation of our development. Yet the consequences are clear. Increasing emissions, urban pollution, deforestation and impacts on communities. The climate crisis is no longer a distant concern. It is a present reality, demanding immediate attention. We recognize the need for change, while also striving for growth that is inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. Across the archipelago, Indonesia is undergoing transformation. With strong determination, the nation is embracing a new era of sustainable development. President Prabowo reaffirmed Indonesia's commitment to building a sustainable, inclusive and resilient future.
We are committed to meeting our 2015 Paris Agreement obligations. We aim to achieve net zero emission by 2060, and we are very confident we can achieve net zero emission much earlier. We aim to reforest more than 12 million hectares of degraded forest, to reduce forest degradation, to empower local communities with quality green jobs for the future. Indonesia is shifting decisively from fossil fuel-based development towards renewable-based development. From next year, most of our additional power generation capacity will come from renewables. Our goal is clear: to lift all of our citizens out of poverty and make Indonesia a hub for solutions to food, energy, and water security.
This commitment is reflected here at the Indonesia International Sustainability Forum, where ideas grow into solutions and challenges become opportunities. Together, communities, innovators and leaders are planting seeds of hope for a better tomorrow. Every seed we plant today is a promise for tomorrow, because the future is something we build together for the next generation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was a video about Indonesia International Sustainability Forum. This year, it has been a forum to mark Indonesia's seriousness to forward with its sustainability agenda. And here, all of us are the stakeholders for that. So hopefully all discussions that are taking place in this room will not stay only as discussions, but will be put into actions. And this forum will not be successful without the help and supports from our sponsors. So as we gather here at ISF Forum 2025, we would like to take a moment to express our heartfelt appreciation to all our sponsors for their invaluable support and partnership in advancing the sustainability agenda. Our sincere gratitude goes to our platinum sponsors, Sinarmas and PT Pertamina Persero. Thank you very much for your support. And also, we extend our appreciation to our gold sponsor, PT Astra International Tbk. And next to our silver sponsors, Standard Chartered Bank, Lubrizol, Vale Base Metals, April Group, and PT Freeport Indonesia. Thank you for your continued commitment and collaboration. And of course, to our bronze sponsors, DBS Bank, PT BYD Motor Indonesia, PT Bank HSBC Indonesia, Siemens Energy, PT Bank Rakyat Indonesia Persero Tbk, Achwa Power Global Service LLC, PT Bank Mandiri Persero, Chandra Asri Pacific, PT Bank Negara Indonesia Persero, Mind ID, PT Medco Energi International Tbk, PT Alamitri Power Indonesia, PT TBS Energi Utama Tbk, and PT PLN Persero. So those are our bronze sponsors. And last, we thank you as well for the support from PT Pupuk Indonesia, Siam Cement Group, Mind ID, Bank Syariah Indonesia, Telkom Indonesia, Indonesia Financial Group, and Burrito Renewables Energy. So once again, we thank you for your trust and partnership in supporting Indonesia International Sustainability Forum 2025, a platform that brings together global leaders, innovators, and change makers to drive forward Indonesia's vision of a sustainable future. ISF 2025 serves as a platform to bring together all stakeholders. So from the discussions that we have today and tomorrow, may we can connect the dots of what to do in terms of sustainability efforts. And other than panel discussions, we'll also have keynote speeches that are also very, very inspiring. So we do hope that everyone enjoy today's and tomorrow's program. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of the Republic of Indonesia. His Excellency Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia. Once again, Bapak Bahlil Lahadalia, thank you very much for attending. We know that you have just arrived, but then, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the Minister. So without further ado, here is a keynote speech from the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia.
Selamat sore, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Yang saya hormati Pak Nurul, Deputi apa sekarang Pak Nurul? Deputi Promosi Kementerian Investasi, Bapak Ibu semua yang saya hormati, yang mohon maaf tidak sebut satu persatu. Pertama, saya ucapkan selamat atas terselenggaranya acara ini. Dulu waktu saya Menteri Investasi, kegiatan ini tidak ditangani oleh Kementerian Investasi. Masih di Menko dulu. Dan sekarang dilakukan oleh Kementerian Investasi. Dan itu cita-cita lama saya yang gak pernah terwujud. Karena itu saya berikan apresiasi kepada Menteri Investasi sekarang, yang jauh lebih baik daripada saya, untuk membuat acara ini. Tapi saya melihat hari ini kalau kita bicara tentang energi baru terbarukan, transisi energi, 90% regulasi dan roadmap menuju ke sana kelihatannya ada di Kementerian SDM yang secara kebetulan menterinya saya sekarang. Jadi saya ternyata Pak Nurul tidak ditakdirkan untuk membuat acara ini, tapi saya ditakdirkan untuk mewarnai isi, substansi daripada acara ini. Karena itu izinkan saya untuk mencoba sharing dengan teman-teman pelaku terkait dengan apa yang akan Indonesia lakukan ke depan. Kita mengerti betul bahwa kondisi global secara geopolitik dan geoekonomi sekarang dalam kondisi yang tidak menentu. Perang, mudah-mudahan kita doakan segera selesai di Timur Tengah. Itu perang agresi militer. Perang dagang, tidak ada satu pakar ekonomi pun yang dapat meramalkan kapan berakhir. Di saat bersamaan, banyak inkonsistensi negara-negara dalam menjaga komitmen, khususnya Paris Agreement tentang penurunan emisi dan transisi energi. Beberapa negara yang menginisiasi untuk membuat roadmap dunia menurunkan emisi dan kita memakai energi baru terbarukan, mulai sekarang rasanya ada yang semangat, tapi ada juga semangatnya udah mulai luntur. Karena mereka tahu betul tentang keunggulan komparatif daripada masing-masing negaranya. Bahkan Amerika, yang salah satu negara menginisiasi untuk Paris Agreement, itu mulai keluar. Kemarin kalau kita melihat Presiden Amerika di pidatonya di PBB, ya agak ragu juga saya terkait dengan kelanjutan daripada transisi energi. Tapi it's okay, itu global. Tetapi Presiden Prabowo di bawah pemerintahan sekarang akan konsisten untuk melanjutkan tentang transisi energi dan energi baru terbarukan. Bapak Ibu semua, menyangkut dengan energi baru terbarukan dan kedaulatan energi termasuk transisi energi, ini masuk dalam asta cita dari Bapak Presiden. Dan kami diperintahkan untuk mengawal. Dan kita tahu semua bahwa Indonesia sekarang dalam kondisi yang memakai fosil masih sangat banyak. Lifting minyak kami sekarang kurang lebih sekitar 580 ribu barel per day. Dan konsumsi kurang lebih sekitar 1,5 juta sampai 1,6 juta barel per day. Jadi kita masih impor 1 juta barel per day. Berbeda dengan tahun 96-97, di saat negara kami masih masuk dalam OPEC, lifting kami kurang lebih sekitar 1,5-1,6 juta barel per day, dan konsumsinya baru 500 ribu barel per day. Nah, ini sebuah tantangan di mana impor kita setiap tahun untuk BBM dan crude kurang lebih sekitar 776 triliun atau hampir kurang lebih sekitar 50 miliar US dollar. Ini angka yang cukup luar biasa sekali. Tidak ada cara lain bagi Indonesia untuk bisa survive agar tidak terlalu banyak impor adalah bagaimana caranya kita meningkatkan lifting dengan 3 pendekatan. Memanfaatkan sumur-sumur yang sudah ada dengan teknologi. Yang kedua itu adalah bagaimana mempercepat wilayah kerja yang sudah selesai eksplorasi untuk produksi. Dan yang ketiga adalah segera kita melakukan lelang terhadap cekungan ada sekitar 75. Selain itu adalah bagaimana kita mengoptimalkan potensi sumber daya alam kita dalam memenuhi kebutuhan energi. Saya ingin menyampaikan bahwa Indonesia salah satu negara yang mempunyai kekayaan sumber daya alam energi baru terbarukan yang tidak kalah dengan negara lain. Panas bumi contoh, kita nomor 2 di dunia. Nomor pertama Amerika. Target kami 2027, kami akan menghasilkan kurang lebih sekitar 500 megawatt daripada panas bumi ke depan penambahannya. Dan untuk energi baru terbarukan selain panas bumi, kami punya matahari, angin, air, laut, dan berbagai macam potensi yang saya pikir harus kita gali untuk bisa kita mengoptimalkan dan memanfaatkan. Di mana potensi itu? Hari ini kami di dalam pemakaian energi sampai dengan 2025 itu sudah mencapai 14-15% itu energi baru terbarukan dari total listrik yang ada. Total listrik yang ada sekarang sudah mencapai 100 gigawatt atau 100.000 megawatt. Nah, ke depan RUPTL tahun 2025 sampai dengan 2034 kita mengalokasikan 69,5 gigawatt untuk energi baru terbarukan. Dan saya pikir teman-teman negara sahabat atau investor dari luar tidak perlu meragukan konsistensi Indonesia dalam mendorong energi baru terbarukan. Dan ini RUPTL kita sudah sahkan. Silakan sekarang ikut mengambil bagian. Kita mengundang investor untuk masuk. Kita mendorong karena energi baru terbarukan ini lokasinya di daerah-daerah yang memang jaringannya belum ada. Salah satu problemnya itu adalah jaringan listriknya. Kita juga mendorong di dalam RUPTL 2025-2035 itu membangun kurang lebih sekitar 47.000 kiloliter sekian. 47.758 kilometer sirkuit. Atau setara dengan 8.000, kurang lebih 8.000 kilometer. Kita bangun jaringan. Supaya pusat-pusat di mana adanya energi baru terbarukan itu bisa disalurkan ke konsumen dengan jaringan ini. Punya tantangan sendiri energi baru terbarukan. Di satu sisi adalah energi ini dibutuhkan, tapi di sisi lain teknologinya masih sangat mahal. Dibandingkan dengan batu bara, memang batu bara biayanya lebih murah. Jadi kita diperhadapkan pada sebuah pilihan. Di satu sisi energi bersih adalah kebutuhan dan konsensus global. Tapi secara ekonomi, batu bara lebih murah. Saya sedang berpikir bahwa Indonesia salah satu negara yang mempunyai cadangan batu bara terbesar. Dan saya tidak setuju kalau kemudian dipersepsikan bahwa seolah-olah batu bara itu enggak bersih. Sekarang sudah ada teknologi untuk menangkap carbon capture CO2 untuk kita masukkan ke tempat X daripada sumur-sumur minyak dan gas ataupun fasilitas lain. Jadi selain memang kita mendorong energi baru terbarukan, kita lagi mencari teknologi agar bisa menangkap CO2-nya untuk bisa ditekan. Agar listrik yang dihasilkan itu juga adalah listrik yang bersih. Ini sekarang kita lagi di SDM lagi mendorong ini secara baik. Bapak Ibu semua, terlepas daripada itu, sekarang kita lagi merencanakan dalam menindaklanjuti arahan Bapak Presiden Prabowo, tapi ini masih dalam perhitungan, sekali lagi, ini masih dalam perhitungan. Kita pingin setiap desa itu punya 1 megawatt solar panel. Dan ini akan masif, lagi dihitung betul ini. Kalau 1 megawatt solar panel di setiap desa, desa kita ada sekitar 80.000. Berarti ada 80.000 megawatt atau 80 gigawatt. Bahkan dalam arahan Bapak Presiden dibutuhkan kurang lebih sekitar 80 sampai 100 gigawatt. Ini potensi juga. Ini saya bantu Pak Nurul untuk jualan investasi ini. Ini. Nah, potensi ini akan kita lakukan dengan berkolaborasi dengan teman-teman investor, baik yang dari dalam negeri maupun luar negeri. Tahap hitungannya udah hampir final. Sekarang masih di angka 6, 7 sampai 8 sen. Tapi di India, saya baca salah satu media, ini ada pembangunan PLTS 220 megawatt dengan biaya hanya 3 sen. Kalau itu bisa diterapkan di Indonesia, katakanlah kalau itu benar, saya lagi mengirim tim untuk mengecek di sana. Kalau itu benar, maka saya pikir ini sebuah hal yang juga bisa kita elaborasi untuk bisa kita lakukan. Nah, untuk menuju ke sana, Bapak Ibu semua, dibutuhkan satu langkah-langkah terukur, komprehensif, dan betul-betul menukik. Salah satu problem kita itu adalah regulasi. Nah, kita sekarang sedang melakukan regulasi yang cepat, yang ramah investasi, yang bisa kita eksekusi, dan tidak membuat berbelit-belit. panas bumi itu izinnya itu bisa sampai 1 tahun gak selesai-selesai. Tapi sekarang kita sudah mulai rubah, cukup 3 bulan udah selesai. Tendernya pun nggak pakai lama-lama lagi. Jadi ini adalah bagian yang kita lakukan untuk merespon cepat terhadap apa yang bisa kita lakukan bersama. Nggak bisa lagi kita menunggu lama karena global sekarang hampir semua forum di hampir semua negara isunya itu setiap produk yang dilahirkan dengan 2 isu. Green energy dan green industry. Dan produk-produk yang dilahirkan dari energi baru terbarukan punya nilai jual di pasar yang jauh lebih tinggi ketimbang memakai fosil. Dan fosil ini tidak akan bertahan lama. Tidak akan bertahan lama dan Indonesia berkomitmen untuk net zero emission pada tahun 2060. Dan ini sesuatu yang harus dilakukan. Nah, kaitannya dengan itu, kita juga membuka diri untuk melakukan ekspor listrik. Kemarin saya di Singapura sudah menandatangani MOU dengan kementerian di Singapura untuk melakukan ekspor listrik. Sudah barang tentu ekspor listrik ini saling menguntungkan. Jangan ada satu negara yang merasa lebih hebat daripada negara lain. Kita saling membutuhkan. Jangan ada 1-2 pengusaha kongko-kongko, kong-kali-kong, kemudian mengatur negara lain. Tidak boleh. Saya sudah sampaikan kepada Singapura, saya kirim, kami siap pemerintah atas arahan Bapak Presiden mengirim energi baru terbarukan, tapi juga harus ada manfaat untuk Indonesia. Dan kita sudah tanda tangan MOU, kesepakatannya sebentar lagi terjadi. Kita akan bangun kawasan industri bersama di daerah Batam, Karimun, Bintang. Dan kita ekspor listrik ke sana dengan saling menghargai izin dan regulasi di masing-masing negara. Dan harga. Jadi teman-teman pengusaha, saya menyampaikan agar masuklah ke loket yang pas. Kalau kepala sakit, kalau perut sakit, datang ke dokter umum. Kalau jantung sakit, datang ke dokter jantung. Jangan sakit kepala, datang ke yang bukan dokter ahlinya. Nah, itu nanti sesat jalan. Dan ini saya sedang rapikan. Cara-cara lama saya pikir sudah harus kita akhiri. Kita masuk babak baru untuk perbaikan internal Indonesia dan global pada umumnya. Ini penting saya sampaikan, jangan sampai ada kesan Menteri SDM enggak terbuka. Saya terbuka tapi tertib pada aturan main yang ada di negara kami. Tertib pada regulasi. Jangan tidak berdasarkan regulasi. Saya pikir ini Bapak Ibu semua, peluangnya kita buka secara baik. Dan apa yang bisa kita lakukan bersama, kita lakukan. Dan yakinlah bahwa Indonesia akan terus konsisten untuk mendorong kepada energi baru terbarukan dengan penyesuaian terhadap berbagai regulasi untuk memudahkan agar apa yang direncanakan bisa dieksekusi secara baik. Demikian, terima kasih. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak Bapak Bahlil Lahadalia, Menteri Energi dan Sumber Daya Mineral Republik Indonesia untuk keynote speech-nya yang memaparkan tadi bagaimana roadmap Indonesia ke depan sesuai dengan apa yang diaspirasikan oleh Presiden Prabowo Subianto. Indonesia is phasing out from fossil fuels into renewable energies, and it has been done in work. And also the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources has laid out its roadmap ahead as well. So thank you once again, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Mr. Bahlil Lahadalia. We thank you as well for your support and presence in the forum of ISF 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone is still in an uplifted mood and energy as well to continue with our next agenda. So the tone was set by the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, so it is very timely indeed when we talk about now unleashing green electricity, capturing the full potential of renewable energy topic. And for this, I would like to invite our moderator for the panel session. Let's invite him to the stage. Mr. Martin Santoso, Associate Partner, McKinsey & Company, to the stage with a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.